Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2. Joining me today is...
Hey, I'm that Matt kid.
They overstepped on each other. They've got to fight to the death now.
Oh, yep.
Matt, you get to pick weapons since you were technically first.
I choose a katana, and I will defeat you with honor.
I choose these hands, and there's nothing honorable about them.
Oh God.
お前は何死んでる
Nani?
Oh my. And Steve's here too, in case you didn't know.
Oh man.
Oh, alrighty. So Matt, along with picking a katana, see, like, okay, hold on. I need to actually stop and dissect this. So Matt picks a katana. So Alfie should get a katana, but he's gonna throw it away mid-fight and just go straight, or not even mid-fight, at the beginning of the fight, and just go straight to like a boxing pose. But like, if you're gonna just negate the weapon, you should like at least let Matt choose a different weapon for you. So like Matt should get like a katana, and you should get like a herring.
No, because like I said, there's nothing honorable about this.
Oh man.
You don't know where those hands have been. You don't know what they've done or seen.
I've drawn the comics with Steve Baxes with these bad boys.
Oh,
Nothing
yeah.
can stop them.
Oh shit.
Oh yeah. There's some dirty shit that those hands have been touching.
Oh man, oh man. Anyway, so yeah, Matt picked our topic tonight along with our poor choice of weaponry. So Matt, what are we talking about tonight?
We are talking about a 4-issue comic called Spencer and Locke. It was put out in 2017 by Action Lab Comics, written by David, I think it's Paposi or Papos, I don't want to butcher that, with art by Jorge Santiago Jr. It is a sort of noir-inspired detective crime thriller with a twist. The twist being that it is basically Calvin and Hobbes. It's basically what if Calvin and Hobbes had a very shitty childhood, and then Calvin grew up to be a detective and still had Hobbes with him going on detective missions and stuff like that. So it's actually really just kind of that premise alone caught my eye because I was a big Calvin and Hobbes fan growing up. And so I read the 4 issues, and I was just like, well, god dang, I want to talk about this. So now we're here.
Interesting. It was weird. I discovered Calvin and Hobbes like a little too late in life. Like I was probably like 12 or 13 around that age before I ever found it. And I was like, oh man, I would have loved this when I was just a little bit younger. So I don't have like a nostalgic connection to Calvin and Hobbes, but I do have like a connection. And I gotta say, reading this with that kind of like familiarity and I guess respect for Calvin and Hobbes was like, man, this feels like so fucking wrong. Like it really does. I struggle to think of something to compare it to. I guess maybe what's the Grant Morrison Happy? I guess maybe Happy is the thing I compare this to, where there's like freaking drunk evil Santa Claus in that, and it's just kind of bad. Where it's like, it's not that the storytelling's bad, it's not that the choices are bad choices. It just feels like this shouldn't be. It's kind of my initial reaction to it. How about you guys?
I loved it. I thought it was great. So yeah, the problem here is I'm gonna have a hard time being like quote unquote objective about this because like this is so much my wheelhouse and so much my shit that it's hard not to just see past that stuff. I was looking at interviews with the guy who wrote it, and he said that the pitch was essentially, what if Calvin and Hobbes grew up in Sin City? And so like it's literally that atmosphere and that vibe, and it's what if literally the entire world was just seen through the lens of Frank Miller and how they would turn out in that way. And when you put those pieces together, it just feels really, really good, interesting. The mystery itself is not great. The mystery itself is very much just like, in every sort of like noir mystery, the plot never totally makes sense, and it's not entirely supposed to either. The plot is just kind of there to hang a bunch of scenes that are interesting introspections about the characters. But even by that standard, this isn't a pretty nonsensical plot that just has twist after twist for no reason. But that aside, I love the back and forth between the Calvin and Hobbes style versus the noir growing up section. I really like old school comic strips. Like I love Peanuts, I love Calvin and Hobbes, I like Garfield, I like all of that stuff. And seeing like the ability to translate those like really simple or deceptively simple beat structures into a story like this and then just seamlessly twist it into like some sort of fucked up noir Frank Miller thing is great. And it's a simple message, but just the idea that like Spencer or Hobbes exists in the sense that this is a manifestation of a traumatized kid just trying to get through the day is really, really fucking cool. And I love the moment at the end where his daughter kills the dude and starts to see Spencer. It's so fucking good. I love the hell out of this. But I'm also just in a huge crime comic kick at the moment. You can ask Alfie. I will text the group chat like every other day, having read like 20 Brubaker comics.
Jesus Christ, Steve.
Yeah.
Oh.
I love this, but I think I'm just in the right place for it, and it's also just my kind of taste.
For me, the first thing I want to lead off to is this is kind of to your point, Ian. This is what Alan Moore thinks superhero comics are. How Alan Moore views what happened to superhero comics is this. Like, he thinks this is what happened. He thinks this is what all Superman comics turned into, and this is what they were before, and the world of bastards and evil, and I can't believe they did this. He's wrong for that, but like this let me finally get it. What he probably sees when he picks up a Superman comic or something is he sees a twisted version of this. But outside of that, which I think is just funny, I really dug this. I thought this was really smart. Like I thought this was really, really clever. I have no prior outside of just general knowledge connection to Calvin and Hobbes. I know just like general stuff, but like I always get it kind of confused with like Snoopy. Like I'm not quite sure what the difference is and stuff like that. But again, that's
British
like,
piece of shit. I swear to God.
I have no idea what it is.
It's just a comic
outside
strip.
Of just again. Yeah, exactly. But outside of like, I don't know the lore yet.
There's no lore. It's a comic strip. It's a kid, and he has a stuffed tiger, and he thinks it's a real tiger. That's the strip.
There's also
there you
just
go.
a substantial metaphysical difference between Peanuts and Calvin and Hobbes, because in Peanuts, the adults cannot speak in a language we can decipher. It's almost Lovecraftian in that way.
See, there is lore.
No.
It's
But
a
like,
deep mythology about how all of the adults are possessed by parasites.
Sure.
But like, outside of that, just like with the general kind of, because again, it's similar to like Dennis the Menace, like the same kind of vibe. I thought this like how it handled it was really, really smart. I love how fucked up it got. I love just how like ridiculously, because to me that's what's so funny is if they tried to play this straight, I don't think it would have worked. The fact that everyone in this comic book talks like how I talk about noir stuff, it's just like they walked in the room and I knew it was in trouble. Big trouble, the kind of trouble that doesn't ask questions, like that kind of shit. Like that kind of dialogue is just instantly endear me. Like if you just lead into it. So like the fact that it lent into that while having these cutaways to the giant panther, and then like the comic book, like the newspaper strip style art, I thought was a really funny like juxtaposition and stuff. So I didn't take this seriously as like a noir comic. This is a parody. This is like a funny comic. I was laughing my ass off, but I don't, not in the sense I was laughing at it. I think that's part of the charm of it, part of the appeal of it is that it's meant to be, because there's some really well-timed gags here and stuff, but at the same time, there's, with all good comedy, there's like a kind of, at least some of my favorite comedies, like there's like a melancholic kind of sadness to it. Like there's some really like hard-hitting moments here, but then also they'll be drawn in like the style of like the Calvin and Hobbes stuff, which is, again, I like that juxtaposition. I think that works really well. So no, despite having no previous attachment to the material, I can appreciate this was done out of love for both noir and the source material. I think it was done really smartly. Like I think this team knows how to make comic books really well. And again, the actual plot of what's going on isn't important. It's just a vehicle just to do these juxtapositions and just to do these kind of parallels and stuff. I think is really, really fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I want to come off and say, like, it feels wrong, but that's, I think, the intention behind it is it's trying to do that. So it's doing what it accomplished. I don't know, like, how much I personally dug that, because I don't know if I fully agree that it's meant to be, like, a dark comedy. I think it is trying to say something, and it's playing into the kind of the humor of the thing as a whole on occasion, but then it's just going to places that, like, it's really hard to see any comedy in it at all. Like, I guess the one that hit the hardest for me was the scene with the babysitter who became, like, the strip club manager.
Yeah, and that opening of that second issue, because they open each issue with basically a straight up Calvin and Hobbes bit that turns just fucked up within the last couple panels, and the one where he walks out on the babysitter and the boyfriend is easily the one that took me like, fuck.
Yeah, and like it's interesting because when he's alone with her is when Spencer disappears. And, like, you can't even have like, that level of that escapism because he's so traumatized by what this woman did and stuff. And so, when you have some moments like that, I don't think that's comedy. Like, certainly you can make a joke about anything. You can make, especially dark humor, can go to places that would seem inconceivable. When you get to ideas like sexual trauma and pedophilia, it's certainly not impossible, but it becomes increasingly difficult to do with any level of tact. And so I honestly don't feel like that scene in particular is meant to be funny in any way, shape, or form. And so it's hard for me to take this as dark comedy as the genre. It's got moments of dark comedy, and I think you could just say that about any noir thing. I think this is leaning more to being noir with kind of a head-scratching premise than it is to just being a straight dark comedy, if that makes sense. Because there's a lot like that where I don't think there's really much of a gag to it. I think it's pretty much straight up on screen. It's just got this very bizarre premise to get you there.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I feel like even by noir standards, there's a level of ridiculousness to the kinds of things that Spencer and Locke are going through that just kind of make it funny to me. Like Matt mentioned, every issue sort of opens with a Calvin and Hobbes gag. So you get the first issue that like very quickly turns into his mom beating him. And then the second issue, which is the babysitter. And then the third one where he fucking shoots his mom in the head. There's something about like the formula here, which is noirs tend to have like one of those beats that define the character and it just keeps going. And then if you look at people that have like made careers out of noirs, they make careers out of doing these kinds of fucked up things to their characters on a pretty constant basis, or keep coming up with them. And so, like, obviously, if the parody here is Frank Miller, and you flip open a book of Sin City, and like every character has one of these kinds of backstories, and so just the idea that you open an issue and every fucking issue it's just something else ridiculously awful that this kid has gone through, I think on a level that is actually kind of funny. It's jarring for sure, but I think that's part of why I think it works so well, is the Calvin and Hobbes strip tributes that turn into just fucking ridiculous traumatizing moments kind of do the opposite of the comedy of the strip. But then you get back to the main story, and the main story is where the humor comes in, of like this ultra jaded detective who talks like an exaggerated noir cop, who's gone through so much shit that it's just not even conceivable that he's running around right now. And then the third and fourth issue, I think, like, really upped the game, and I kind of wish the series was just more of that, where it turns into a parody of a different genre, and you have him going on that weird acid trip where he thinks he's like Captain Kirk, but you read like the opening dialogue of that scene, and he's referenced like 4 separate sci-fi properties in the span of like 1 paragraph. And like that's where the comedy comes in for me, is where like the jarring twist of it is so ridiculous that when you get to the parts that play straight, you can't take them seriously.
See, and I guess I didn't really see that as much of a parody of other things. I maybe I didn't pick up on the other references, but like that is just another Calvin and Hobbes beat.
Yeah, that's just Spaceman Spiff, but Rocketman Reynolds this time.
Because that's like Calvin would occasionally, the strip would turn into Calvin in his wild imagination, imagining that he's a spaceman, and so this was just doing that.
Right. And I mean, we get that at the opening of the strip, but then it goes from the Calvin and Hobbes art to just a straight up sci-fi art style, like it's an episode of Star Trek, which I think is just taking that gag to a different extreme.
I really like the line it walks, though. I mean, I think that whole sequence in issue 3 is absurd and over the top in a way that does feel like very much like a dark or black comedy, but then it still brings it back to at that very end when he's got the person in his grasp, and then it turns into his mother with the bullet wound in their head. And I don't know, I agree that there is a weird sort of tonal shift happening between these things that are so absurd that they have to be comedic, and things that are so fucking just viscerally not something you would ever laugh at. And I actually really like the way it walks that line. I think it keeps you constantly it keeps me as a reader very, I'm never sure exactly where they're going to go with it. And so I really liked that issue in particular, the way they managed to seamlessly blend these really intense, very legitimately traumatizing story beats while still keeping it just absurd and ridiculous. I think it was a really interesting read for sure.
All right, maybe it just didn't hit for me, and like it's weird because I consider myself to have a pretty dark sense of humor sometimes. So maybe it just didn't hit for me in that way, and I took it more seriously than it intended. And so like again, I feel like I'm the negative Nancy on this one, but like I didn't hate it while I was reading it. I didn't like, this is not my Calvin and Hobbes. I'm legitimately curious what the hell Bill Watterson would have to say about this.
Right.
But I didn't get offended by it or anything. I just, while I was reading, I was like, oh man, that's so messed up. No. And so I guess the like comedic beats of it just didn't hit for me because I was too lost in the Calvin and Hobbes-ness of it, I guess. I'm not really sure how else to describe it. It just, I guess the dark comedy didn't hit for me, and I just took it more seriously because of that. And so a lot of it was just like, oh, poor Calvin. Poor Locke.
I don't know, it's just, when I'm reading that first issue, and I'm just like, okay, this is Calvin and Hobbes, and then it immediately is just like, and now he's getting beat by his mother, and the immediate next page is now he's looking over a dead body in an alley. Like, it's fucked up, but it's like so over the top fucked up in a way that I don't know how to respond to it other than just kind of laugh at how absurdly fucked up it is. It's sort of like Steve was saying, it's like it's not just he's a kid with a tragic backstory who becomes a jaded detective. He's a kid with the most tragic backstory fucking possible. And so there is definitely an absurdity to it.
I also just feel like there's a certain level of like you don't really know how you feel about a thing until you start talking about it. But I think another layer to that is like if you're trying to describe something you're reading or watching to someone else that has no context, I think your ability to describe it to that person kind of blank sort of gives away your reaction. And so like Matt, that description you gave there, like if I'm telling my friend like, okay, so I'm reading this comic and it's Calvin and Hobbes, but like what if Calvin and Hobbes was actually super fucked up? And so you open with a Calvin and Hobbes sketch that ends with his mom beating the shit out of him, and then it flashes forward and he's a jaded detective with a giant panther that's missing an eye investigating a dead body. And I don't know how to say that without literally laughing my ass off.
Yeah.
Like it just sounds really, really funny, and that's where I think like I think you get the joke at that point when you're just like trying to describe the literal events of this book.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, for sure.
I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm so immersed in comics that, quote unquote, oh, this is so ridiculous. I'm like, it's fucking comic books. There's fucking, galactic invasions and multiverse ramifications and time travel shenanigans and like, it's just that shit you read it every week and you're just kind of used to the over the topness, but you just take it straight, and so that's kind of, I guess, where I came from on it is hearing you describe it, I agree. Experiencing it as I read it, I read it straight. I didn't feel it was ridiculous as I was reading.
No, I mean, I think that's fair. It's so good at like playing it straight. Like if you took Spencer's dialogue and just gave it to a human who was his partner, this would just be like a pretty run-of-the-mill noir detective thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it never goes outside the lanes of like what it's trying to be, and it sells it so hard that like, yeah, when you get to that second issue and you've got the whole bit with instead of Rosalind in the Calvin and Hobbes comics, you have Ramona. When you get to that bit, and then when you get to the bit later where Spencer disappears, I mean, it does definitely hit pretty hard as you're reading it, and I think you're right that is something that it's absurd, but it still feels very, very intense in the way I think it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other half of the equation here is like, yeah, on the one hand, it's parodying Calvin and Hobbes, and part of the ridiculousness is just like describing this premise with that in mind. But then the other half is like straight up noir crime comics. Like Frank Miller may be like the main inspiration, but you look at like the entire landscape of crime comics in the US at least, and it's not a wide picking. Like it's not a variety of stuff. It's almost entirely noir comics, and it's almost entirely populated by jaded detectives, Philip Marlowe types, people that do actually talk like this. And even by that standard, some of the stuff that Locke is saying is ridiculous and really, really like if I hand that into an editor and I labeled it a crime comic, even they would be like, okay, this is way too much. No noir detective would even talk like this. And so just on that level, it's great because like you compare something like this to like Darwin Cook's Parker, which is kind of an over-the-top noir comic as it is, based on an over-the-top crime novel. Even that, like as crazy as it can get, it never seems to like toe the line that this stuff does. And so you add that kind of like exaggerated dialogue on top of just this ridiculous brutality to Calvin's backstory, and you marry it into this little book that's this very sincere look at like how we use exaggerated fiction to escape from things that are too violent for us to process, and I think it just lands.
Yeah.
Alfie, why are you quiet?
Yeah, I was just agreeing with what Steve was saying. The basic idea of it, for me at least, is that kind of, wow, this is so fucked up, it's just comically fucked up. Like that's how it came to me. Is like the thing. It'd be like, the way I viewed this was just like if a comic came out that was like, oh yeah, Bugs Bunny was sexually assaulted by his babysitter. I can't even say that without laughing. Like that's like yeah, that's so fucked up. But it's such like a funny sentence. Like you can't. It's that level of humor to me. Where like yeah, that's ridiculous. But it's the way this works for me is because it plays it completely straight, but the characters involved in it do not for a second wink at the camera or like say, oh, this doesn't really affect me. Like, the emotions are real. The damage they take is real from these actions, and there are like really like kind of wholesome and like emotional like scenes in this with like the daughter and the trauma of like on the rooftop scene and the end of the fairy star, the last issue, like all of that I think is really strong, and that's the advantage you get of playing it straight. But it does the thing which I think is a testament to when you're dealing with this material, that because you brought up like superhero comics like doing these things, is the thing that they kind of miss is like you'll get like a C or D list like Marvel or DC character who in the Silver Age would have been like a supporting character or like a regular villain, who is now rape victim X number 5 or murder victim number 3 that's just disposable, thrown away with no and it's played completely thing, but there's no emotional resonance to it. It's just hollow, it's just pure shock value kind of thing. And that is where I think it gets gross, and that's where I feel it gets wrong. It's because you're doing it for no purpose other than just for that. This, I don't think there isn't a point to it besides also being funny. It's that kind of humor where you can laugh at it, but also you can cry at it, kind of thing. Like the reason why there is a whiplash tone here, the reason I think is intentional, and I think it does take a level of craft to make it work right. But I can say for me at least, it did work right. I felt like I was having the reaction of like, oh, this is so fucked up, at the same time as, oh man, that sucks. Like that at the same time, which I think, given that we've got two protagonists here, well, one of them is a not real panther, sorry. And the other one, where we have like the most stereotypical, grizzled, hard-boiled cop in the world, is I think you are meant to be playing with these two extremes. You are meant to be contrasting and conflicting, and that's like the appeal of it. That's what this can give you, that like a more like kind of, I guess, Ed Brubaker is what I'll use because Steve's on his thing, crime comic couldn't give you, is because you'd get the straight crime thing, but you wouldn't get the absurdity of it, like the ridiculousness of it. And I feel like that's kind of inherent with some of these comic characters, and why I did like the Alan Moore comparison, because yeah, it is kind of absurd when you look at what we've done to Batman. like when you actually break it down, it's like this is a children's character that we've turned into, as Garth Ennis like kind of puts it, as like this 21st century monstrosity amalgamation of all of our worst hopes and fears, and that's just kind of happened. Doesn't make that a bad thing. We've got fantastic stories from it, but that is what we've done. And I do think it is helpful as a creator or as an enjoyer of fiction to at least always be a little self-aware of that, to never get so lost in the kind of meat of the thing that you forget that these still are paper people, that these still are like at least certain characters come from a place. And I feel like with something like Calvin Hobbes, which like even the very early Batman or Superman comics were dealing with like spousal abuse or like murder, and like they were for kids, but the subject matter was always inherently dealing with like social issues, so it's an easier leap to go through. Something like this is what more so on the Looney Tunes thing, where there'll be some political commentary, but at the end of the day, it's entirely farce. Like, it's entirely meant to be taken on that aspect, which I think lends it to the more absurdist humor fact, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
I also think it's kind of funny that this premise does actually end up getting traction with this book, because ever since Calvin and Hobbes premiered back in, like, I think the 80s or 90s, there's been like a number of like attempts or like fan arts or stuff here and there where like what if Calvin grew up? What would this look like? There was an animated series pitched at one point that would have been this. And for a long time, there was this sort of held view that Calvin and Hobbes is actually secretly a dark comedy about this child that's hallucinating a tiger because he's mentally unstable, which was just sort of a soul-sucking way to look at just a very fun children's comic.
Anytime I hear shit like that, like there's a great solution that someone made to this, which is anytime someone takes like a childish wonderment thing and turns it into dark, edgy, take like a serious thing and turn it into stupid silliness. So like my favorite example of it was Game of Thrones is just a D&D session where the DM got really petty and started killing off everybody's characters.
That's hilarious. But no, yeah, no, it is exactly that, right? Where like people will say shit like, well, you see, Ed, Ed, Eddy is actually a series of a bunch of children who died while they were young and are stuck in purgatory, which is why all their tongues are discolored. Like that's like it's that kind of like weird sort of stupid shit that Calvin and Hobbes had to deal with too. And so you throw that concept at the wall and just make it that, like, okay, fine. What if he is just a seriously damaged kid that's hallucinating a tiger and grows up to live a fucked up life? Look at how fucking ridiculous that would be. And on that level, it's also just really interesting because the thing about Calvin and Hobbes that I really, really like is that it's a series that was very clearly designed for children to read, but kind of like Peanuts, it was not talking down to children. It always had references to other things. It always had sort of like emotional pushes and pulls. There's a lot of empathy that gets created in just like the short panel strips that Calvin and Hobbes was doing. And so like it was just very achingly sincere in that way, and it was not just like Garfield is a kid's comic, you know, like Garfield is not particularly the brightest thing in the world. It's the same sort of 3 or 4 jokes over and over again. But compare that to Calvin and Hobbes and Peanuts, and there's a lot more layers to it. And I think what makes this work as an exaggeration is that it's taking the cynical, exaggerated reading of Calvin and Hobbes and throwing that sincerity back into it and giving him that little girl at the end that becomes equally traumatized and letting him like actually spend an entire issue on drugs, kind of decompressing all of the wacky, crazy shit that he has been through, gives that character a lot more life, and it doesn't feel like, kind of like Alfie was saying, it doesn't feel like we're just throwing trauma onto him and then expecting that to be a substitute for character. We're letting him actually engage with that stuff, and when you get to issue 4, and he has like that really kind of heartbreaking moment in the Calvin and Hobbes strip that opens it, where he thinks of this machine where you jump through and you'll become something else. And it's because he wants to think of another world where he could be happy. Like, by that point, you've completely sold me on this version of Locke, and I feel so bad for him.
For sure. Yeah. And it's that sincerity that allows moments like in issue 4, the moment that you brought up when Hero, his daughter, is like in the closet hiding with Spencer. And she's got the gun, and it's shown as Spencer shooting the thug, and then it fades away, and it shows that she's the one, you know, holding the gun and holding on to Spencer as a way to get through that, what must be an insanely traumatizing moment in her life. It's like, that is a very powerful moment in that last issue, and that can't happen without like a very sincere approach to this story. And so it's definitely hits for me on that level. I do agree that the mystery story itself is not terribly compelling. What did you guys think of like how the actual kind of narrative of the piece played out?
Yeah, man, I'm just apparently I hate this book. I don't know what to say. I'm just gonna go through this whole review, and I'm not gonna say a single positive thing. And I swear I wasn't like nerd fuming at it the whole time. I just kind of read it, and now that I'm thinking on it, I'm like, eh. But yeah, no, the mystery is just kind of... Alright, so I respect it in that it's a very small book. Like, you said this was Atomic Comics or something like that published this?
Yeah, it was published by, I think it's Action Lab Comics, who I've never heard of.
Yeah, so it's obviously, you know, small publisher, not one of the big two, certainly. You know, I've never heard of this writer before, never heard of this artist before. So I respect that you've got to do your limited series, your creator owned, your like get them in the door real quick, get it out real fast, so that you have something creator owned under your belt. Like I understand and I comprehend and I respect all that. But something you need in a mystery story is to be able to set up and let us know the way your world works, the rules of it. And so when the bad guy is his dad all along, and you don't get that reveal until like the moment it happens, it's like, okay, what a surprise. It reads like soap opera at that point. And again, I guess the more I think about it, the more I talk about it, you guys are 100% right. It's meant to be dark comedy. It's meant to be over the top and ridiculous. But because I didn't get that, or because I took it straight, because I read it straight, I read that reveal straight, and I was just like, well, that wasn't set up fucking at all. That's dumb. And there's just like a lot like that. Like, oh, Miss Crabtree or whatever it was, Miss Crabapple. The school isn't what it once was. A lot of problems with the students doing drugs, huh? End of the book. Ah, so it was you all along. I'm like, oh, okay, that's... You couldn't give, like, another clue besides, oh, the school's doing poorly? Like, that was the only clue that led you to that information. I've always said the way to write a good mystery is I should have all the information that the main character has, and if you as the writer of the mystery have done everything well, I as the reader should be able to figure out the mystery before your main character. If you've laid out everything and I've gone through the journey and uncovered the information with the main character before they explain it, if I've paid absolute 100% attention and I've really honed in on the story, I should be able to figure this out before your main character does. And there's just no fucking way in this. Like, it's just so much information is entirely dependent on things the main character knows that the reader does not. And that was a little rough.
I agree that the mystery part of this is actually the weakest thing, but I don't completely agree with that assessment of it, because I feel like the problem is almost the opposite, where it's just like too achingly obvious, where the end of the first issue is his dad showing up, introducing himself as her grandpa, with giving his name and killing everyone involved, and then going away, and then he disappears for 2 issues until the end of the 3rd issue, where he's like, okay, we got to go find my dad. It seems like that the fact that it was his dad from issue 1 and it comes back in 4, you're almost expecting that to get more character development, but instead it just becomes like the most obvious answer he has.
Does he say his name is Mr. Locke? And I just...
literally the last panel of the first issue is name's Augustus Locke, and you can call me Grandpa or something.
Okay,
like
yeah,
that.
I missed that part then. So, my bad on that part. So that kind of undermines my point just a little bit, but I'm going to still say the fucking, the principal thing comes out of left field.
Well, I think the principal thing, I think, works only because that's the only other character in the book. So, like, obviously that's the last person you want to circle this back to. But the deeper problem with the mystery, Ed Brubaker talks about this, where he says when you're writing any kind of mystery story, there's always 2 plots happening. There's the plot that the reader is seeing through the eyes of the main character, and then there's the plot that's happening in the background that the bad guy has to be doing. So anytime you get to any one scene in a story, like walking up to a crime scene, you have to know what he calls the invisible plot behind it, which is what the bad guy is doing at this exact moment that led to this situation in all parts of the story. So he would have like timelines stepped out where like he'll have the entire story diagrammed, but then he'll have a second diagram superimposed on top of it to show you all the background machinations that were happening to cause the story that you're seeing to unfold the way it happens. And when you do it well, it's entirely seamless and you can't tell that the work is being done. And when it's done poorly, you can tell that it wasn't thought of at all. And this is one of those cases where like the invisible plot of this story just doesn't exist. it introduces itself immediately. Everyone just kind of stops what they're doing until the main character catches up, and then they resume it again. And that's probably the weakest link for me, just because I feel like you could have had some really cool, like, cathartic payoff with his dad if he was in more than one scene.
Yeah, I mean, really, what it comes down to is the only real mystery just kind of comes down to why Sophie was murdered. And the only twist there is just that she was working for the bad guy the whole time. There's just not a lot there that is really set up or paid off, because you get no sense that that's what's happening when he talks to Crabtree in the first issue. So I do agree that the whole mystery side of it is unfortunately the weakest link, which is a shame because the dialogue writing is so good and just so perfectly nails that, but the actual mystery narrative happening isn't particularly interesting.
Yeah, which is probably the thing that makes me the most upset, honestly, because I think they nail the Calvin and Hobbes part. I think they nail the parody of, like, the hard-boiled character archetype. But they don't really, like, go out of their way to break the formula of convoluted mysteries, because they do the exact opposite and make it the least convoluted thing on the planet. And that just doesn't work in its favor, I don't think.
I guess you could make the argument, like, would it be funnier if, like, it was an even more, like, like the principle was, like, just the chain of, like, a long list of things, I guess. For me, I guess I just, as a reader, don't genuinely put that much stock into the... Because I agree with you guys. I think completely that the mystery doesn't really work as a mystery whatsoever. I think if that was the intention, and that is a failing, which I think is rightly to be criticised. But at least from my reading, I never got the sense that that was important or anything. I don't think the mystery to be solved here is necessarily what we're doing. It's more just like a skeleton, which is getting us from point A to B to see these different takes on these familiar, like, character archetypes, and to get these scenes and to get these different things. Like, I think that's more so what I think is the intention. And again, I could be speaking out loud because, like, I've been reading a lot of Sherlock Holmes recently. And Sherlock Holmes, there is 99% no way to know what the fuck is happening with any of them. It's like, the information is not given to you at all in the majority of those stories. But that isn't a negative, because that's not the point. The reason of reading those stories is for the interactions between Holmes and Watson, or just like the weird and wonderful kind of locales and locations we end up in. Like, it's like the mystery itself is just kind of the excuse to do it all. That's the vibe this gave me. This didn't feel like at any point was I intrigued or gathered by the mystery. I was more so just wondering, like, all right, where are we going to next? What kind of wiki situation could you send me, and kind of thing. So I didn't really get disappointed by that because I never was invested in it. But that could just be me.
I mean, I think what makes it work in sort of that, like, Sherlock Holmes story way, where it's more the mystery is a narrative device to give you these really interesting scenes and interactions. I think it helps that it's short. It's a 4-issue thing. It's not long. It's not dragging this mystery story out, acting like it's the most interesting or original mystery story ever written. You're absolutely right, where at the end of the day, it just kind of serves to explore this character and sort of this world that he lives in, and it's very effective at that because most of the individual scenes are extremely compelling and extremely fun to read. So I definitely do agree where you're coming from with that.
Yeah, I mean, like, at the end of the day, the mystery is solved for you explicitly at the end of issue 1, and then again at the end of issue 3, and then the 4th one's not really much of a mystery at all. So you're really not getting much mystery investigating to begin with, and it is just Calvin going through, or Locke, I guess, going through the bizarre traumatic situations. And since those character moments hit, and that's the whole point of the mystery anyway, then it is fine for me. I think my only bigger hang up on it is just that there is kind of an art to noir mysteries, and there's sort of escalating stakes and how preposterous they can get. And seeing, like, how well everything else is parodied, I just kind of wish there was at least an attempt to kind of, like, maybe not, like, change the mystery, but at least hide your cards a little bit better.
Sure.
I will say my absolute favorite thing about this book, though, like bar none, is how it's able to seamlessly go through the Calvin and Hobbes skit into the main story, and not even in a way of like there's one page of that and another page of that, but like how like within scenes you'll go back and forth in panels between Calvin and Hobbes and the main story. Like you'll have the car chase where a random panel will just be Calvin and Hobbes in their cart racing down, or you'll have the panel sequence where it's the dinosaur on the top 3 panels before you cut down to the museum. Issue 4 has that great fucking moment where we got the opening page where he talks about like wanting to be happy and he imagines himself as a bird, and then halfway through the issue when him and Spencer and the little girl are all hiding together, the panel is directly above that is him as a bird, afraid of like little like snowballs or whatever falling on top of him because he thinks maybe there's like a chance of safety and solace here, but it's literally being shot at. The subtlety of that stuff is just so fucking good.
Yeah, I love the way that when he when he meets Ramona again in the club, we immediately flash back to what Ramona looks like in the Calvin and Hobbes bit. It's sort of this way of showing that he hasn't moved past that trauma, that seeing her still immediately brings him back to that place. And I think a lot of that is really effective. And honestly, that leads me to just a broader praise for it, which is that I just think the art is really, really good. I love the style of this. I love the direction of it. I love how dynamic a lot of the motion is. The artist just absolutely nails not only the Calvin and Hobbes bits, which they absolutely do, but also just nails the action and nails the sort of the brutality of some of the moments. The art in this is absolutely phenomenal to me, but that could just be because I really, really like the art style of the overall thing.
Yeah, I like the art.
Great.
I don't know when I noticed that Spencer has a missing eye and it's been replaced with like a button. But like I started picking up on it and I looked at like the flashback stuff and saw that he still had the 2 eyes, and I was like, are we gonna get one of these flashbacks where we're gonna see what happened to his eye? Because it's gonna be fucked up. I already know it's gonna be fucked up, but like I am. You know, you normally don't do that unless you're planning to show something.
Chekhov's eye.
Yeah, Chekhov's stuffed animal. So I was surprised that we didn't get anything like that, but I did like that detail. I thought that was like a cool detail to distinguish like older Spencer from younger one. You know, I thought that was kind of a cool idea.
Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to think of what else I have to say. Unfortunately, it is very short, so we've kind of...
I mean, they got another 4 issues. I noticed that.
Yeah, they got a sequel.
They do. So I've read the first couple issues of Spencer and Locke 2, and we're going to get Spencer and Locke 3. I'm kind of curious what you think about this, because Spencer and Locke 2 introduces, like, sort of a villain, like, sort of a supervillain, and he is a spoof of a different comic. Like, so he is a spoof of Beetle Bailey, the, like, fucking lazy army person who's always getting into trouble with his commanding army ranger people.
So it's is just going to keep introducing different comic strip characters?
Yes, it basically is. So like in the sequel mini, we get Roach Riley, who is sort of a, like I said, sort of a parody of Beetle Bailey, and it does that same thing where it's like, what if the Beetle Bailey comic but super fucked up, and we introduce the horrors of real war, and that's basically his backstory. And it's honestly pretty creepy. Like, reading the first couple issues, like, Roach Riley is a kind of terrifying villain. But then the third book isn't out yet, or the third series isn't out yet, but we know it's going to, in some way, parody Garfield and Peanuts. And so I'm just kind of like, I don't. Does it lose something by branching out into other comics? Like, it's like this
No, I think
franchise
it
is
something, absolutely.
Oh yeah, no, that's a fucking brilliant idea.
yeah, where it's just going to be parody after parody of different things. But yeah, the first issue of the the sequel series is fucked up, because it's just like, oh, here's Beetle Bailey, he's being lazy at the military base, but then they get bombed and it's fucked up. So yeah, it continues along that path, and it's also a bunch of Locke being investigated by internal affairs for all the shit he did in this book. So yeah, it continues to be good. I haven't read all 4 issues of the new series, but it does continue down this path, and it seems to. I hope it keeps getting bigger and more popular, because it's very good.
So the question I had, and I don't know if we ever really like get to see it, but like so like Locke's in the strip club, right? And he's got Spencer walking behind him.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, so has he got like Spencer like on his belt, or is there like a special pocket in his coat somewhere? Like, is he just carrying Spencer? Like, I don't know what's happening here.
They actually do show that in the first book of the second series. He keeps Spencer in a pocket in his leather jacket.
Okay.
That's hilarious.
Because one of the first scenes, like the second scene of the first book of the second series, is him like in therapy, and he walks out of the therapist's office or whatever, and you can see he's got Spencer just like as a stuffed animal in like the pocket of his coat, and it's really cute.
Adorable.
To answer your question, though, I don't think it's a bad idea at all to like keep doing sequels to this where you're just like riffing on other strips, because again, part of the interesting thing here is it's entirely a series about what kinds of things we escape into to kind of register our trauma for us. And when it comes to stuff like old school comic strips, particularly ones that were kind of darker than their age demographics we're usually aware of, you have a lot of untapped potential there. Like, old school Snoopy and old school Charlie Brown are really fucking depressing. There was like legitimately some weird stuff that goes on there. Like, there's whole critiques of religion and stuff like that, and like how these characters are played up. And you throw that into a context where you turn the subtext just into the most fucked up possible text there is. And I think there's a lot of room to examine like why we do these kinds of things in the first place, you know? Like, Calvin and Hobbes is a strip that exists for a particular kind of audience and a particular kind of mindset. And the need to turn it into something almost Dark Knight Returns-y is an interesting loaded question. And what is it about us as people that like sort of feels validated by turning something childish into something extreme and violent that this book examines so well? And I think doing that with other stuff that has equally deep subtext might just be worth pursuing. Like, if Calvin and Hobbes' whole thing is he secretly just a schizophrenic who's lost his mind and is hallucinating a tiger, and how fucked up you would have to be to think of it that way, then I'm sure you could do something equally creepy and weird with Peanuts, and how like we were saying earlier about how like none of the children can understand what the parents are ever fucking saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea at all. I worry about it becoming just too dependent on the gimmick of what if Sunday morning cartoon comic, but fucked up now. But as long as it keeps maintaining that level of quality and introspection, which it mostly seems to based on what I've read of the second series, then I think it absolutely can continue going in that direction as long as it wants to.
I'm just trying to think of like, because after a while you started getting diminishing returns, I guess, because like your second one, Beetle Bailey, I'd never heard of. And so I was like, okay, that's a deeper pull, all right. And then the third one is like the thing that I thought would have been obvious with just Garfield and Charlie Brown. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I wonder, like, where do you start going after a little bit? Because you can name a couple other, like, really famous comic strips. Like, you could do Boondocks, I guess. But, like, after a while, you start getting really obscure. So I don't know how much legs that has. Because you're going to start getting some really deep pulls, and I'm not sure how much inspection there is to do with some of those characters. But I don't know. Just a thought.
Maybe he'll do Family Circus, and they'll have to top how fucked up Calvin and Hobbes' life was. I don't know.
At that point, you're just doing the aristocrats. Zing.
if they do decide to like keep doing series of this, which I would legitimately love, the one thing I will say that maybe needs to change is I don't think it needs to keep being 4-issue minis, because just trying to force everything to go into that sort of release schedule and that story structure might not be the best idea, particularly for different strips. Like maybe they should just switch these over to like OGNs or something, or just like oversized one-shots, because it's a fun bit, but like constant 4-issue minis of the same bit might tire it out faster than anything else.
Yeah. I don't know. I'll if you ever read the second series, I'd be curious what you think of it, because I need to get all the way through it. But I do hope it keeps going, because I do definitely really like what is here. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Really good.
Yeah.
We're not even at an hour of recording yet. Did anyone have anything else they really wanted to bring up about this, or do we want to just wrap up and call it early?
Can I go on one slight tangent
You
that
do
is
you, Steve.
related but might give us another avenue to talk about things?
Go for it.
Okay, so it's kind of bizarre to me that there's a genre, an entire genre, that seems to be in the comic book world occupied by 90% one dude and no one else, which is crime comics and Ed Brubaker, because certainly crime stories are a thing and they exist in all mediums and a variety of people do them, and there are certain filmmakers and certain TV directors and actors and stuff that gravitate towards crime storytelling. But unlike every other medium in existence, it seems like if you're going to buy a comic book that is specifically a crime comic, it is 90% chance it's going to be Ed Brubaker. The other 8% chance is it's going to be Darwin Cook's Parker adaptations. And then the remainder is just maybe some obscure random stuff like this. And it's just really, really fucking weird to me that like one person has cornered the market on an entire genre in the comic book industry, to the point where like it's hard to read this and not immediately think of stuff like Ed Brubaker's Criminal.
Damn, that just sounds like something I want to be able to do. Just fucking like, I want to be the only guy that does the thing. Like, I guess I need Don McGregor to die so I can be the only dude who will write Zorro. You know, like,
Yeah.
I just need to be that. I need that to be my thing.
I mean,
It's
does
so
it just come
weird.
down to the popularity of that particular type of story, in at least in the medium of comics?
Who does
Most people
westerns these days? Is there like a go-to guy for westerns besides the two guys who were on Jonah Hex for years?
Probably not, honestly.
I could do westerns.
It's really weird though, because like crime comics like have always sort of existed, and specifically in like European markets and stuff. But like in the U.S., they really start upticking 80s onward, and you get like Brubaker wanting to do crime comics and not being able to, and then he gets really big writing Captain America, and Sean Phillips gets really big drawing Marvel Zombies, and so they're like, okay, we're on the height of our careers. If we ever want a chance to do shit like this ever, then this is it. So they launch Criminal. And it becomes like this multiple Eisner Award-winning series in the mid-2000s. And for some fucking reason, no one else on the planet since then has done crime comics except those two. And even like the occupying percentage that is Darwin Cook's Parker, there's only 4 of those books compared to all of the Brubaker crime comics.
Alfie?
The reason I think you get that though is because the reason I think you get that is because like there's no, why would you write a crime comic, right, and use that idea when you could just use that idea in a Batman comic and get so much more money? Like, why would you, the incentive I think for creators just isn't there compared to event avenues, because again, Ed Brubaker can do that because they took a gamble and it kind of paid off. But I think it's also a very, like, I'm a comic fan, Steve, and I've never heard of that series until you mentioned it, you know? Like, I don't see, there's very little kind of buzz about just other genres in comic books in general, because the other genres are either being done in the main books or out in under other indie adventures, which aren't like they'll just be doing their own thing, and there'll be like a multitude of different takes and stuff. So I think that's kind of why it happens. Is Brubaker just became that guy because Brubaker's name sold for doing crime comics, so they let him publish more crime comics because there was a proven track record for it from previous things. One of the big reasons being he had a successful Batman crime comic series, you know, like I think that's kind of what happens to a lot of creators is they just don't, they might have these ideas, but it's very rare if they get allowed or the funding or the lack of security to go and do it. And even then, Brubaker's not exactly raking in the dough, you know? Like, he's
well, he is for everything that isn't Bucky, apparently.
Even then, you know? Like, the dude is still, I think, would appreciate a little bit more of that Marvel money, as most comic creators would do. So, like, I think that's part of why that happens, you know? Like, it's just, we don't have the kind of wealth of genres in comics outside of superhero that we used to. And again, superhero itself isn't a genre because it's kind of absorbed the other types of comics. Like I said, you want to read crime comic, there's like majority of DC titles published now could be classified as crime comics because that's what every Batman comic is.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the unfortunate thing is that like you want to do any kind of genre work and you get sucked into the superhero world on some level or another, even though I like superhero comics. But like you look at something like this where it's a parody of several things, including like crime fiction and noir tropes and stuff. And if you're someone that absorbs genre material through comic books, then the exposure to all of the stuff that this genre entails is just harder to come by. Where like even if you go to comics for crime stories and you read every Ed Brubaker crime comic there is, it's predominantly stuff that's in that sort of noir, old school paperback series, men's adventure novel kind of style. It's not the Sherlock Holmesy type. It's not like the political thriller type. It's a very specific subset of crime comics, and it's also still the only kind of crime you're seeing. And I feel like it's part of why I think I like Spencer and Locke as much as I do is because I think it clearly reads as kind of like a well-rounded take on the absurdities of that genre. And so like it's not just a we're making fun of Dark Knight Returns. It's a we're making fun of like various kinds of tropes in various kinds of crime stories and various kinds of comic strips. And that sort of parody and that sort of level of craft of like, okay, we're making all of these pulls and all of these gags is something that you might go over your head if you only read the comic book source material that it's lampooning, because you're just not allowed to get that much else out of it.
Fair enough. So the conclusion of this episode is Ian's a big dummy?
Yes.
No, we love Ian.
Mm-hmm. Ian doesn't feel very loved. Oh, I knew it. I knew it. You guys just pretended to think I was smart all along. Alright, well, I don't really have much else to add on the crime comics thing, so I think we'll just go ahead and wrap up, go on to ratings. I'll go first because, like, I think you guys are right, but that doesn't affect the fact that I didn't really have, like, a great time reading it. I didn't have a bad time. It was just fine. But just the more I sat there thinking on at least my experience reading it, because I read it wrong, apparently, I just liked it less as I went. The more I talked about it, the less I enjoyed it. So I guess I'm going to go with 2.5 out of 5 very uncomfortable scenes about pedophilia.
Nice.
For me, oh, never mind. I'll go ahead anyway. I'll beat you. I'm the fastest one alive this time, man. The jewel containing the ultimate power. So my again, I had a really fun time reading this. I thought it was short, sweet, and very well executed. I like silly cartoons, and I also like very grizzled, don't climb under books, but damn it, they get results, detectives, in any kind of fashion. So like the pairing of those two was very, very amusing.
I just think all cops are bastards, and this book is bad because of it. So there.
That's true. That's very true.
You guys are just feeding into the military propaganda.
Fair point.
See, that's
so
why
for
I'm
me-
the big smart one, because I'm the wokest. Ha ha ha.
That's how that works. I will give this. Let's go 4 out of 5. Transmogrification machines with very dark subtext.
As well.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I liked this quite a bit. I think having, I don't really have the background with straight noir stories that like Steve has. Most of the noir stories I've read are things like this, where it's noir with a twist, be it a Batman story that's more of the detective thing, or be it like The Wolf Among Us or something like that. So as it is, and coming at it with the background that I'm coming at it with, I really enjoyed the heck out of this. I'm gonna give it 5 out of 5 bags of Colombia's finest cocaine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you guys as well. I really liked it. My biggest problem was just kind of, I thought the mystery was lacking, and I mean, for whether or not that was intentional, it was just something that I kind of wished was developed more, and so that's my biggest down point. Otherwise, I think it's fantastic. So I'll give it a 4 out of 5 traumatic flashbacks about murdering your mother.
I mean, I think we've all been there.
Yeah, Mike Myers, Locke, those two.
Alrighty. So
Norman Bates.
next week we'll be doing a discussion topic, and I believe it's Steve's turn to pick, if I'm not mistaken. Yes? Yes, no, maybe so?
Idea, but I can think of something. Crime. Topic. Okay. I think I've got one. I don't think we've done this, and it's kind of it's specific, but I think it might be fun. Let's just like go right for it. Let's just like straight up just talk about Marvel versus DC.
Oh man.
Just like as like a context within companies, the characters are better.
So let's just talk about like Marvel and DC as the two big comic book publishing companies. Like, well, the movies and stuff, whatever, cartoons, whatever, like better selection of characters, yeah. Like, none of that matters. I just talk like straight up Marvel comic books versus DC comic books through the ages, and the pros and cons of either, and where we land.
Okay, so it's a big topic.
The debate that's been ongoing for 60 years.
I know, yeah.
We sell it here. Finally, it ends.
Title fight.
Let them fight. Oh man, that's a cool idea.
About to just say, Steve about to just be like, let's just do a 1 hour like power scaling debate.
Yes. Okay.
Marvel versus DC.
So who wins,
Go.
right? Batman with prep time, Goku after Dragon Ball Super has already taken place, or Dominic Toretto with family.
Oh, easily Batman with prep time. He can prepare for the family and for Ultra Instinct.
But that's the secret.
Batman
Doesn't
has
have
family.
Yeah, no, I just, just that let them fight joke made me think of fucking, like, Marvel and DC kaiju. Like, just a kaiju that represents the company.
Ring Fang Foom versus what? Giganta?
I mean, I'm okay with this, because I like Giganta.
King
Giganta
Fan
versus Ring
Foom
Fang Foom, let's
versus
go.
Titano the Super Gorilla.
Okay, there we go.
Yep.
Could work. Alright, well, everyone, I hope you join us for that. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the Calvin and Hobbes erotica lover.
Oh, that's very
It gets
uncomfortable.
worse every
that
time.
hurt. That hurt me.
Very
I didn't
uncomfortable.
like saying that. Oof.
I am the champion of the oppressed.
And I am exiled to Noir Comics.
There we go. And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.